So welcome back to another episode. Now last year I reviewed the 1991 Video Game Buyer's Guide by EGM, and it was fun to look back in the past and see all the biggest games in 1991 that were coming out for that Christmas. And today I dug up the Game Fan magazine, Volume 1, Issue 3. And this is pretty cool. This is the January issue. It just at that point had turned into 1993. But we're going to look back in this issue, which really covers a lot of games that came out in Christmas time, 1992 and around that time. So it should be a lot of fun. Now what's awesome is as soon as I open up the cover, I'm taken back to 1992 because the Turbo Duo was selling for $299. And they were really trying to push this. They wanted everybody to experience their system, and it's always been a crying shame that a lot more people didn't. And they were trying to do a comparison here to the Sega CD versus the Turbo Duo. They were saying you could get the Sega CD, for $299 plus a Genesis you needed to buy as well, which was $99. Wow, it's crazy. And together, that's $399, nearly $400 versus the $299, asking price for the Turbo Duo. And they had trade-in offers that were ridiculous. You could trade in your Turbo Grafx and get $50 savings, so you'd get the Turbo Duo for $249 at that point. And that's unbelievable. And it came with so many games. Gates of Thunder, Bonk's Adventure, Bonk's Revenge, Easebooks 1 and 2, Ninja Spirit, the Turbo Chip. Unbelievable. Yeah, and it says, obviously, the Turbo Force magazine. All of that for $249, dude. Holy shit. You don't get pack-in games like that anymore. They really wanted it to catch on, and unfortunately, it did not. And anyways, right here, this is pretty cool. This is the top 10 games of 1992. It's the most wanted and the top 10. We'll start with the top 10. At number 10 was Cobra Command on the Sega CD. Yeah, interesting. TMNT 4 was the next one. Zelda, which is Super Nintendo, so it linked to the past. They just said Zelda. 7 was Wonder Dog on the Sega CD, and I think they were just in love with the technology of the Sega CD at the time. Everybody was like, oh my god, any game that came on the Sega CD was like, this is a big deal. And I think they bumped up Wonder Dog a little too high there. Number 6 is just a hockey game, an NHL PA game on the Super Nintendo. 5 is World Heroes on the Neo Geo. What a different time we live in when this is their top 10 list. Number 4, obviously a great choice, Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo, a game that was unbelievable, the start of a massive franchise that we would be playing over and over and over again, all these years later. Number 3, I just did a big video about this, Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo, which was Final Fantasy IV in Japan. That's at number 3, a very good choice. Number 2, it really shows you how big of a deal Street Fighter was back in the 90s. It actually made number 2 on the Super Nintendo. At number 1 was Sonic 2 on the Genesis. That's the number 1, of their top 10 games. That's so cool. Now here, this is an interesting most wanted list that they were talking about at the time, because it really shows the difference between then and now. And a lot of these games, a lot of you guys have been like, what are these games? And they're games I always talk about. My mind is always a little bit in the past at times. At number 10, Xeria 2 on the Super CD-ROM. That's Far East of Eden. And that's a game that we wanted to come out. They promised was going to come out. It never came out. Number 9, Road Rash 2 on the Genesis. That is a great, cycle game where you're beating the crap out of people. Lots of fun. Number 8, this one hits home. Dragon Warrior 5. They call it Dragon Warrior 5, which was Dragon Quest V in Japan. A game that they just, skipped over for a bunch of years until, a few years ago when we got the DS version of that game. 7 is Batman Returns on the Sega CD. Not a bad game. 6 is Time Gal, kind of fun. 5, Phantasy Star 4. What? They put Geo next to it. Oh, maybe they meant to put Genesis, but they spelled it wrong. They wrote Geo, G-E-O. That fucked me up for a second there. So Phantasy Star 4 was about to, we were all waiting for that to come out. Very exciting stuff. Sunset Riders on the Genesis, a really good kind of Western, side view action game. Lots of fun. Final Fight CD We eventually got that, and it was heavenly. It was the best version of Final Fight you could get back then. Number 2, and this is very important to this issue, I'll get into it in a little bit, is Streets of Rage 2 on the Genesis. That was the most wanted game. Number 1, the number 1 most wanted game was on the Sega CD, and that was Sonic CD. God damn it. That was a great game. I know they changed the music. I love the Japanese music of that game, and I love the reimagined music of it when they brought it over here. I'll just read you some of the scores they were giving some games back then. World of Illusion on the Genesis, obviously that game did extremely well. A 91, a 98, a 99, 91%. And they did by percentage out of 100. And this, I'm gonna get to it. I'm gonna get to it soon. Streets of Rage 2. 97%, 95, 97, and 97. An amazing game. We came to know a little bit later on. And this is when they started talking about Revenge of Shinobi 2, and they called it Revenge of Shinobi 2. We know it got called Shinobi 3 Return of the Ninja Master when it came out here, but they were talking about the Japanese version of the game, which was called the Super Shinobi 2. 96, 97, 97, 93. These guys really loved their video games back then, and they gave some pretty high scores, to be absolutely honest with you. And Night Trap, well, they didn't totally love Night Trap. They gave it a 69, 73, 67, and a 67. But a game that they did like was Road Blasters, which was Road Avenger. And that they gave it 97, 99, wow. 95, 92, And that was just like a cinematic game where you kind of push the arrow where you want it to go, and there's an iOS game version on it. Now here's a game I'm going to be talking about very, very soon. A game that is long forgotten, unfortunately, but a game that's got incredibly high scores, and that is Landstalker. Listen to this. 100%, 98%, 99%, 99%. This is the Japanese version they were talking about at this point. We all wanted it to come over here, but we're going to get into that in a little bit. Anything else that's kind of a little bit of fun to read? Mario Kart did extremely well. A 97, 98, 95, and 96. Very well done. And they were reviewing a couple of Turbo games. Spriggan 1, Spriggan 2. A couple of great Super CD-ROM games that were released in Japan only. They never came out here. I imported Spriggan 1, and it was probably one of the most heavenly shooters, no pun intended, I had ever played. It's such a fantastic game. Spriggan 2 is good, but it ain't Spriggan 1. And it's so nice to see stuff like this. I miss these days. Seeing Neo Geo reviews when the games were brand new. Alpha Mission 2, Sengoku 2, and Blues Mission all were in the 80s to 90s. People loved Neo Geo games back then, especially the reviewers really ate them up. I don't know if they were getting those games for free back then, but that's just damn cool. Yeah, it's nice to see that. And we're flipping through here. Here it is, folks. I got this, and I haven't mentioned this yet. I got this magazine Christmas morning, 1992. Christmas morning. And when I opened it up and I'm flipping through it, I don't know how to describe it. This was a magical magazine. It just totally hit me and caught me off guard with a few things. Streets of Rage 2, right here. I saw Streets of Rage 2 and I'm like, oh my God, check that out. I'm like, is this out? Is this out? And I remember it says available now. And I went on Boxing Day, the next day after Christmas, and I bought Streets of Rage 2, and me and the girlfriend at the time, we played that every single day for months. For months, we never got sick of Streets of Rage 2. We tried to, we all try, we beat the game with every single character, each, two playing it, trying to unlock anything we could, getting as much as we could out of the game. When we got too much out of that game, we really, really milked it. It was pretty awesome. And flipping through here, obviously Revenge of Shinobi 2, as they were calling it. Look at this big review on Sewer Shark. Everybody was nervous. I told you this before. People were nervous. People were excited about, Sega CD games and seeing cinematics and movies play on your Sega CD. That was exciting. But there was also a lot of us that were very afraid of it changing too much. That video games were going to change and they were just going to become cinematics. that was it. That's all you'd be watching. You wouldn't be playing video games anymore. And a lot of the early Sega CD games were just point-and-click games. And that made us all nervous, people who like to play Street Fighter and, Streets of Rage and things like that. It's like, oh, is this going to be the future of video games? It was cool to see the technology, but we were nervous. And that has to be mentioned at the time. Night Trap going on there, the big controversial game from back then. And here's Annette again, a spiritual successor to Ernest Evans. And we can't forget about Ernest Evans. It's so much fun looking through these magazines. Road Blaster FX here. Let's look at all those great pictures. Look at that. It was a bit of a cartoony game, but we loved it. Now here we go. This is where I first really heard about this game. I have it in a Famitsu magazine from back in the day as well. But they were ranting, they were raving, they were giving it the greatest score and they were heralding it as one of the best video games ever made. And what's so sad is, I went to a video game convention, I was doing a panel there, and somebody asked me a couple of questions, and I mentioned that one of my favorite games was Landstalker. I really enjoyed Landstalker. And I said, hey, hands up for anybody, does anybody know Landstalker? And there was like 2 people in the audience. And I was like so disturbed. I'm like, nobody remembers Landstalker? And that was the big preview here of the Japanese Mega Drive version of Landstalker. This is where I first saw it, and it really, I'm not using the term a Zelda killer because that's just like ridiculous. It was a Zelda type of game, 3/4 overhead, with puzzles and action, and it was unbelievable. Like the graphics and everything at the time. This is what we were waiting for. And here, I will read this. This is pretty funny by the person who wrote the article here. Once in a while, a game comes along that really surprises you. Landstalker is one of those games. Anticipating its arrival, and by judging the early screenshots, I knew it would be good. But what it ends up being is the perfect action RPG. If this was an American release, I would give it Game of the Year. Listen to that motherfucking hype. That's a lot of hype going on, and honestly, the game deserves it. I'm going to talk about it quite a lot in an upcoming episode, but I just wanted to mention that. Oh man, it takes you back flipping through these magazines of all the cool games back then, and the different kind of excitement. Like nowadays we have our excitement for our modern games, but these games were modern at the time. Like Mario Kart, Super Mario Kart, that's just ridiculous that was coming out. And here was the awesome 2-pager. This is Spriggan Mark II. And then we get Spriggan, the first game, which I think I got about a year earlier and just blew my mind. And I did a big review on Spriggan. It must be maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I'm losing track now with all the episodes, but and an entire Neo Geo section talking about the games I mentioned earlier. Obviously Alpha Mission 2, Son Goku, Blues Journey. Really great stuff. Really nice stuff. And I always remember here's something. I always remember this right here. Finally, an arcade joystick for your Super Nintendo. I wanted that for my Super Nintendo, for Street Fighter, more than anything. And I opened this up Christmas morning. I was like, oh, this is unbelievable. Like, I just wanted it so badly. It would have been awesome. And you just gotta love it, checking out Fatal Fury and all this. You just can see what was important. And I said it last time for 91. It's the same for 92. Is Japanese gaming was gigantic. It was so huge. I can't even tell you. It completely was everything for the American market. Most games were Japanese made. Now here we go. This is a section in the magazine I used to love. It was called The Graveyard, for video games that came out on machines that died a little too early but were not forgotten. And this is a way for them to not forget about the game and to highlight the game and say that it was a strong, beautiful game on the system. And in this issue, they showed Granzor on the Super Grafx, and I did a review on the Super Grafx. It must be around 7 or 8 years ago. It was the successor to the PC Engine in Japan. It only got a few games. It didn't do that well. It died a very, very quick death, but it had some interesting games, and Granzor was an interesting game. I played it years later, and I built up Granzor in my mind from this. I'm like, oh my god, the day I get to play Granzor will be an incredible day. And when I played it, I was like, yeah, it's Granzor. It's pretty cool. It's pretty fun. And I did enjoy thinking back to the old Super Grafx days of growing up, reading about this legendary game called Granzor. And, here's some stuff. Game CD music that you could order. And I remember being so stoked thinking, oh my god, they have the Ninja Warriors on CD, the soundtrack, and Fatal Fury's music. I was losing my mind, never mind Outrun's music, because back then you didn't have video game music on CD. It was very expensive and very, very hard to find, so they were something that you really, really wanted to get. You wanted to get, like, look at this, Captain Commando on CD, just so you could finally listen to the music and just take it in, because you're a fan. You're a fan of these old arcade machines, these Genesis games, Mega Drive games, all that, Turbo games. You just wanted sometimes to listen to the music. That would have been just, you know, things we take for granted now, but back then we were a really big deal. And okay, we're nearly at the end of this magazine. A couple of things I really want to mention. They're talking about... This is interesting. They're talking about the Neo Geo and a game that was supposed to come onto it that never did. It never came out. Here it goes. Here's just a few of the SNK's 93 lineup. We'll be bringing you the rest and a full report, of course, in our upcoming CES issue. The 100 mega action RPG Crystallis will be coming out this summer. Scheduled for March is, Super Sidekicks. So what they were talking about was Crystallis is an action RPG created by SNK. It came out on the regular Nintendo, and it was a fucking great game. I've really never had a chance to talk about it, but it's a really great game. Where they were talking back then that there was supposed to be a Neo Geo sequel to that game, this action RPG, on the Neo Geo, and that's a kind of one of the types of games that the Neo Geo really needed. It would have been so unbelievable if we got a Crystallis 2 on that machine. That would have changed a lot of things. That would have been unreal. And it's just so fun to see all the games that were supposed to come out that never did. And oh, here they start talking about the first SFX game, which was Star Fox. That whole new technology, that brand new chip, and Star Fox was going to be the game to use that. And we all found out that, yeah, it sure was, and it blew our minds. It became known as the FX chip. And we come to the end of Die Hard Game Fan, Volume 1, Issue 3. What a trip to the past for me as well. Like, I'm flipping through this, the same as you guys are seeing it, and it's such a trip to see games that were so popular and were the big Christmas games back then, and the difference between then and now, and Japanese gaming then and now. It's really, a lot has changed over the years. A lot has changed. I think video gaming's gotten a lot better, but I sure do miss the old days of 1992. So anyways, guys, until next time.